Right, so this is going to talk you through how to make a proportional symbols map. So I'm going to have a look at making proportional symbols for the GDP per capita data of these 11 countries. So what do I need to do? First off, I need to think about a sensible map. So I'm going to open up Chrome. Let's just get a world map. Find a world map. And I probably don't want a world map with loads of stuff over the top of it, so something like this one would be useful, but it's pretty small if I have a look at the resolution down here. So one thing I can do, if I go into tools, just go size large, that'll find me bigger quality maps, and probably what I also want to do is get a blank one. I want the countries on it because I'm going to overlay some bits and bobs, so pick something that looks sensible. Let's go for one of these. Let's copy this image across into something. So I'm just going to make it, for the purposes of anything else, in here. Alright, let's move these around just so we've got it nice and easy. Voila! Right, let's move it over so I've got another row actually. Okay, so I've got myself a decent world map, and I'm ready to roll. I could be equally making this world map in Word or anything else, but for the purposes of making it easier to look at, I'm just going to do it in here. So, what do I need to do? First of all is I need to think about the equation that I want to work out the diameter of the proportional symbols that I'm going to add. Because effectively what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a shape, and I'm going to insert a circle, and if I go to format I can alter the size of the circle so that it is whatever size I want, and I can dump that over a particular country, and it's probably that I'm going to get rid of the fill perhaps, or make it slightly opaque, but the size of the country, or the size of the value I'm looking at, is going to be over the top of the country. We'll have a think about how big they should be in a second. So what I want to do really is I want to work out what value do I need to add into this size here to make it a proportional circle. So you could say, well, why don't I just work out, my biggest one here is Iceland. Iceland is $60,000, so if I had a sensible circle on Iceland that wasn't ridiculous, that was my biggest one, that was something like that over the middle of Iceland, could I not just work out that the biggest size that I wanted was about 2 centimeters or 1.5 centimeters, and then work that as a ratio down from that? Now, not really, because the whole point of a proportional circle is you're representing the area that's actually found within the circle. So to do that, we need to do some pretty basic, little bit basic equations. So if we think that we know that the area of a circle is pi r squared, well, we're trying to work out what the radius is, and we want the area to represent what the GDP per capita is going to be. So if we think that actually instead of area we'll put GDP per capita, the GDP per capita equals pi r squared. Work that through. Let's get rid of the squared on the right hand side of that equation, so let's square root both sides. So the square root of the GDP per capita equals pi times r. So get rid of the pi on both sides. The square root of the area divided by pi equals the radius. And that's what really we want to find out. And actually for this we want a diameter, because that's what Excel wants us to do. The height and the width are the equivalent of a diameter, so that'll be 2 times the radius. So in this bit in here, let's have a think about what we need then. So we want an equation that we said equals 2 times, and in fact let's just get our favourite little magnifier open again, just so you can see a little bit more clearly. I'm just hovering over where these are. So what we want is we want 2 times, because we want the diameter and not the radius. So 2 times, let's put my cursor back in there, I want 2 times the square root, which is SQRT, the square root of this cell in here, so B3, 2 times the square root of v3 divided by pi. Now I could type in 3.14159, whatever else it is, but actually I can do it on Excel as you can with most things. So if you just type in pi, open brackets, close brackets, that will return that 3.14159 blah blah blah. And then if I close all of, in fact I don't need that one, if I finish on this, so I've got 2 times the square root of the area divided by pi. And that gives me 127 in here. And it may, if you do this, give you the $sign before your 127, and that might be because Excel's trying to be a little bit too clever and thinks you've been playing with currency already, so it'll get rid of, or it'll try and transfer across the same format. And if that happened, you'd just go into format cells as we've done before. You go to, instead of currency, you'd want it on number, and I did this earlier, but change it to number and knock down the number of decimal places just for the moment to 0. So I know that the diameter of the circle I would want for the UK to represent 39 thousandths worth of GDP would be 127. Okay? I don't have a unit at the moment, but just 127. I can drag that down, which will copy that equation down for all the other countries. And there we see Iceland, the biggest one, is 156. So 156 doesn't really work very well, because if I make myself a circle that's 156 centimeters wide, it's going to be absolutely massive. So this is the bit where you need to use a little bit of common sense. And what you want to do is you want to think, what is the largest size that I want my largest country to be? And I would say, looking at this, probably this size that I've got on here is a little bit too big for Iceland. So I'm going to go into format here. I'm going to try and let's take that down a little bit. Let's take it to 1.4 and see what 1.4 looks like. 1.4 by 1.4. Right, and let's put that, oops, let's move that over the top of Iceland. That looks like that. And I think, right, so I need to now get all the rest of mine in proportion to that. So my Iceland one down here, I actually want to think about what number do I need to times things by to get that. So let's get our calculator up for a second. And previously Iceland was 156, okay, and I said that I wanted it at, crikey, I'm getting old. What did I want it at? 1.4. So let's say that I am going to divide that by 1.4, and it's 11, what's that, 111, I'm just writing this down on a piece of paper so I've got it down next to me, 111.43. Right, so that means that to get myself an answer of the 1.4 that I wanted, I would have to divide by 111.43. So I'm just going to do that for all the values. So this one here equals, so the UK's one, I'm in cell at the moment F3, so my equation in here is going to be equals E3. Look how it highlights the blue box around E3 so that I want that, and then divided by 111.43. And if I take that and again drag this all the way down, that'll get all the values that I want. And I'm just going to, for purposes of this, just format this to get rid of a few of the decimal points. So let's just put 2 in place. And let's see, Iceland, you can see Iceland's is 1.4 as we wanted. And then all I'd do is I'd go through and I'd copy and paste these, get myself another circle, take it to the next one. The US is over here, and the US should be size-wise 1.37. So I'd take this one over here, I'd look at these, what was my size? 1.37. And change the width and the height to 1.37. I left the UK out, so I'll bring back the UK over here, and the UK should have been 1.14. 1.14. And I'll just make sure that as I'm doing this, I just make sure that I put it right over the centre of the country that I'm looking at. Copy and paste again. Let's go to the next one. India was much smaller. Stick this over the middle of India. India was 0.24. 0.24. See, India's is much smaller. Let's put this in the middle of India. Perfect. And I could do that and carry on doing that for all the countries that I was looking at. So what else would I want on a map? Well, I'd actually need a scale, I'd need a title. The title's fairly obvious, I could write that up at the top, but the scale is a little bit trickier to think about what you'd want to do for a scale. And I'll show you very quickly how we'd make a scale with this. So we've got all of these values down here that are representing our different GDP per capita. So all we'd want to do is we'd want to take some fairly standard GDP per capita, sort of sensible sizes. So our largest GDP per capita we've got is 59,000. So let's say that on our key we'd want one maybe slightly larger, and let's round that. So let's call it 60,000. And you can see me typing underneath here B14 60,000. And you can see straight away it's actually filled in for me the size of the circle that I'll need for that. And let's take those down in fairly even chunks. So let's say I'd want a 40,000 and I'd want a 20,000. And voila, it's got me the sizes of the bubbles that I'd need. So I'd just take one of these, I'm copying and pasting it, Control C, Control V. I'd drag it down somewhere in the corner of the map where you're not using anything. And I'd think I need these three, so I'd take, I want this one to be size 0.81. So I'd go up to the top, size 0.81, 0.81. There's my first one. Let's take it again, copy and paste. Let's get a second one. Just stick that above it for a second. That one needs to be 1.14. 1.14. Wonderful, there's my second one, and I need one third one. Copy and paste. Stick that in up above. And my largest one wants to be 1.4, so let's put this one at 1.4. 1.4. And then I've got myself three different circle sizes. I'm going to neatly stick those together. I'll type into these squares behind something like legend. Let's move these a tiny bit further across so that I just out of the way. Oops, that's nudged the size of those. Let's not do that. Let's stick them in the next one. So let's just go behind here. Let's take legend out. Let's stick legend in there. And let's write the sizes on here. So this was 60,000, 40,000, and 20,000. And I probably want to do something snazzy with them. Stick this kind of thing in, and put under here GDP per capita in US dollars, something like that. I might even put the dollar signs in front of those, etc, etc. What might be nicer, probably if I've got some kind of box around the outside of my legend. So that would be up in here. Stick a thick board around my legend, etc. Sizes aren't quite right, maybe I need to change some of these just to include everything over here, etc, etc. And there we go. I would probably, if I was doing this, like I said earlier, stick a title on, stick a north arrow on. If I was doing, it'd be much harder to do on this scale of on a world map, but I'd add a scale on. Now I'm going to show you how to do it with this map, but I wouldn't suggest you did it for a world map because it'd be very distorted for a global map. But if you were doing the same thing for a much smaller scale map, you were perhaps looking across Cambridge or looking across an individual county or looking across a glacial valley, it would be appropriate to do. So don't do it for a world map, but I'm going to show you how you would do it. So quite simply, open up Google Earth, and when you've opened up Google Earth, then what you're looking for on Google Earth is you're looking for a distance on Google Earth that you can then find a comparable distance on your map. So Google Earth is slowly churning into life on my old school computer. Teacher's wages. What can you do? Right. Yeah, it's eventually loaded. So I would find somewhere around the world, and let's take, for argument's sake, because the map's landed here somewhere around here, let's take Algeria down here. So here's the outline of Algeria, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure with the measuring tool up here, the little ruler. I'm going to measure a distance on here, and I'm just going to go from the furthest west to the furthest, I've just left clicked, to the furthest east on the map, and I can see on this it tells me that that distance is, let's have a look, what's it say, 2 million meters. Let's get it out of meters, let's put it in kilometers. So it is 2,145 kilometers from the furthest west to the furthest east part of Algeria. So I can go back onto my map back here, and I know that the line from the furthest west to the furthest east over here, bingo, that line there, I know that that line length is the same distance as this distance was here. So that line on there was 2,100 kilometers. I know that this line here is 2,100 kilometers. So I can just take this over off here. Probably what I'd want to do, because it's not a dead straight line, and maybe I could use a bit of Pythagoras if I wanted to. I know the height up here is 0.4, I know the width is 1.88, so that's two sides of my right angled triangle. I could use a squared plus b squared equals c squared very quickly to work out the length of the hypotenuse, and then I could stick that as a straight line across and do that. That's one way of doing it. As I've got a world map, I'm actually going to do something even easier than that, which is I'm going to say my Algeria choice was a bad one, and I'm going to find something that I know is dead straight. So let's go over to the US, and I know that this border between the US and Canada is dead straight for a long period. So I'm just going to take my measuring tool again. I'm going to go in over here at Vancouver, one of the greatest cities in the world, and I'm going to go straight across the border down in here, and I'm going to say that is 2,000 kilometers on there, so that I know that this line here is 2,000 kilometers on here. So let's insert our shape, line, Vancouver, across to the Great Lakes. There we go, one line. Let's make it nice and thick. Let's make it a slightly different colour from the blue that we've been using. Let's make that in a red, and let's stick that down on here, and I know that that is 2,000 kilometres. And voila, I've got myself a scale. Add yourself a little north arrow next to it, and jobs are good. So that's how you make proportional symbols. So, technique. Find yourself your map, work out what the biggest size of the circle that makes sense on your map. If you look at these ones here, what you don't really want is overlapping circles, and it may be that you need to place a few down and work out how big a circle can be before it gets too big. But what would be inappropriate is if I had lots of countries around here and all of my circles are on top of one another. Let's just pop a few more over into the middle of Europe. You can quickly see how this would become far too congested, and you wouldn't be able to work out which country was which and which they were referring to. So you want to try and keep those circles separate. If there's, say, one overlap, two overlaps, it's not the end of the world, but you really want to try and keep as few as possible. So think, what's the biggest size that I can possibly have? Work out, like I did in column E here, your formula. So equals 2 times square root of whatever you're trying to do, divided by pi, and then you need to work out what you're going to divide that number by to get to the kind of size that you want for your map. Once you're finished, nice and simply, if you just highlight the whole of the area that you want to do, Control P, send it to print. There's a selection. I haven't got a printer linked up to this computer, but there'll be a selection where you can click on the drop downs, just the highlighted area. That'll send that through to the printer, or you can print it instead to a PDF. That'll ping it through as a single page onto a PDF, which means that you could use that as a JPEG afterwards and resize things, and it wouldn't matter about the size of these circles changing as you try cutting and pasting things across into Word or anything like that. I'd recommend you do that. Keep a copy of the raw data in Excel in case you realise you make a mistake. Keep it in Excel, then save it as a PDF. Print it across to a something like one of the Adobe printers or something like that, and then you've got the options afterwards of just print screening stuff, saving them as JPEGs, and using the JPEGs in your Word files, which are much more user friendly. Okay, and that's done.